What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Over the weekend, the PlayStation 5 Pro continued to dominate conversation with gaming, and now we have some more information getting out there around some of the resolution and frame rate that was presented to us through these different games by Sony, and some of the findings are just weird. We'll go over all of that, though, here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Flappy Bird, as that situation has kind of gone off the rails and people are really unsure as to what exactly is happening here with this new release. Well, the original creator has even chimed in now. And then we'll also be talking about a certain port for the Dreamcast that's looked really impressive, so much so that it might be time for them to lay low for a bit. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members of the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button down below this video. And we're gonna start today with that Nintendo Switch OLED bundle that was leaked out before by D-Labs. Now, there are multiple SKUs that apparently are set to be announced, but one in particular did bundle in Mario Wonder, and it looks like that is happening as we can see this posted up. This by Nintendo Life, as they are quoting a tweet that was released by Nintendo. This was in Australia and New Zealand, mentioning the bundle Full of Wonder is set to release in Australia and New Zealand on October 24th. They do say that the bundle comes with Mario Bros. Wonder and 12 months of Nintendo Switch Online to help you get started with online play. Now, they don't mention a price point here, so we will have to wait, I guess, to see how much this bundle will cost. I mean, if they have it close or right around what the typical OLED system costs, that'd be pretty good. I feel like with the value there, a really good game, and then the 12 months of Switch Online. We also need to see if I guess we'll have this announced in other regions here during this upcoming week, along with some of those other SKUs that had leaked out, because as we see here, and we see in the past, D-Labs, they're pretty much on it every time, right? Whatever they're talking about, they're most likely getting from behind the scenes through different retail listings that are in the databases, and it's like, okay, I mean, it's already there. They're just waiting for them to go live, at least with an announcement on places like Twitter X. So there you go. I guess keep an eye out for some of the other announcements that should be set here pretty soon for Nintendo. Also, we did get some images of the box art that's being put out for Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, and it looks like there's a ton of content being packed into this game, which, if you've been seeing the trailers, yeah, it seems to make sense. And of course, based on the history of the Tenkaichi series, they like to have a bunch of characters in there. Well, we can see this is posted up. This is from Slow Plays, just saying that Sparking Zero officially confirmed to have over 180 characters, and that also means large file size, 100 gigabytes. That's, yeah, it's quite a sizable game there, but I feel like we've been getting more and more used to these kinds of file sizes anyway, so based on the number of characters and stuff they're putting in there, I guess not too surprising. I mean, the back, even on the back, the cover art and stuff looks awesome there for the box shots and everything. So, I mean, this is coming up pretty quick. October 11th, now we're less than a month away. I'm excited to see all the different characters in there, which, I mean, technically a lot of it did leak out a bit ahead of time, but they've also been dropping trailer after trailer after trailer, just continuing to keep the hype up for this game, which I will say I think Bandai's done a very good job with that with some of these trailers. So I'm excited to finally get my hands on this game, that happening October 11th. Oh, and then of course, a month later, we will have Dragon Quest III HD 2D releasing, and we can see this posted up from their official account. It has now gone gold. They also say just 2 months until the worldwide release on Nintendo Switch, PS5, Xbox Series X, S, and PC on November 14th, which, I mean, okay, so it's gold now. I am still expecting a demo for this game. Square has done a ton of demos, pretty much for every single release. I mean, they did one for Dragon Quest 11, and like it's very consistent for them to put out these different demos. So I almost wonder if that's something that will be announced at Tokyo Game Show, not necessarily released there, but just announcing their intention to have a demo at some kind on the lead up to its release. Typically, they want to get it closer to that release date, so maybe like 2 weeks before to kick off November, just right at the end of October, put out a release on all the different systems for a demo with save data that carries over. I think that'd be awesome. Of course, then we can get our hands on the game a bit early and get started. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with the PlayStation 5 Pro that, I mean, certainly has caused a conversation online. One way or the other, people are at least interested in talking about the system, beating down the system, getting excited for the system. It's all over the place right now, and it has brought up the conversation around diminishing returns and how much better can these visuals actually get going forward, especially when you start to factor in how much money it costs right now to get to diminishing returns that we're just not really noticing these kind of leaps anymore. Well, there was an entire recording by Digital Foundry that was done, and by the time you're seeing this video, I believe it will then be public and officially posted anyway. Typically, they'll have this up on their Patreon for a few days, and then they'll release it. But we did have some summaries that were coming out from people who did have access to it, and this mostly touched on resolution and frame rate that was observed in some of the footage that Sony had released. So I think that is an important point to make here. This isn't Digital Foundry having a PlayStation 5 Pro in front of them and recording footage off of it. They're going over the footage that Sony themselves have presented to us. But nonetheless, you can see this posted. This is from JMain over on Twitter X, and they note all the different games that were showcased here with The Last of Us Part 2, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, Alan Wake 2, Horizon Forbidden West, Hogwarts Legacy, Gran Turismo 7, and Dragon's Dogma 2, along with Assassin's Creed Shadows. I feel like Last of Us Part 2, Ratchet & Clank, those are fairly straightforward, as we did see those with like 60 FPS. I'm having like 1440p. Basically, those were really being used and zoomed in on to showcase PSSR, which, I mean, that is the big focus from Sony right now, is them using this advanced AI upscaling technique that is similar to DLSS, but as Digital Foundry mentions, it's above FSR, but not quite on the level of what we see NVIDIA have with their own DLSS or upscaling techniques here. However, the games that really caused, I would say, conversation again, but it's kind of both sides of the spectrum here, because on one case, we have Alan Wake 2 that had two modes shown, of course. We have a 60 FPS mode that's at 864p, and then a 30 FPS mode at 1260p. The only thing that's strange about this is I feel like that resolution at 60 FPS is very similar, almost the same as like the base PS5. So I'm kind of unsure about that one, and that's why I said this is very weird. Now, of course, using PSSR, that might just be the strategy there to continue upscaling that at a higher quality, so the image itself just looks cleaner. But you feel like, as Sony themselves mentioned, that the system is like, what, 45% better at rendering and stuff. You feel like that would just be higher in terms of its resolution. So that's one that I would be curious to see independent testing from Digital Foundry, especially if they can have things like ray tracing and stuff shown off there, just to kind of get a comparison right in front of them, because we're only seeing what Sony has shown us so far, and they're going to give us a curated section of footage, I assume the best possible footage, but then you see that resolution number, you're like, whoa, okay, hold on a minute. But here's one that I think surprised a lot of people. Dragon's Dogma 2 looks to be running at 60 FPS, and they mentioned it might be using PSSR. Now, Dragon's Dogma 2 is one that it definitely hammers the CPU quite a bit, as shown with like PC comparisons and benchmarks and what we know now with the consoles currently, but as we've heard, the developers will be basically making patches and developing not different versions, but different settings, we'll say, for these games. And yes, that would include PSSR, which maybe that is enough just to get it over the hump to get to 60 FPS, especially when you take things like VRR into account. Maybe it's not always 60 FPS, but it can use that variable refresh rate to just kind of smooth things out and make it look as clean as possible. It looks like Assassin's Creed Shadows also appears to be running at 60 FPS. But again, they mentioned 864p. So, I mean, look, this is all they can really go on right now with the footage being shown, but this is a situation where the PS4 Pro, I think, is going to be one of those very strange and at times very interesting devices to see these Digital Foundry breakdowns on, but it's very clear they need more access to the system, I think, to give us a better look at a picture, if you will, here. So I think it's interesting to see these preliminary findings, but I do believe there's quite a bit more to the story than what we've seen so far just through footage from Sony. So we'll keep an eye on this, but I will tell you, this seems like something Sony could have avoided altogether if they would have just included more independent testing leading up to its release, like from Digital Foundry, or at least its reveal. There's still time to send a system, for example, over to Digital Foundry to see what they can find, or at least then convey to us, because that's the biggest problem Sony's had, is to show us why exactly people should be buying this or be excited for it, because the footage they showed on stream is very difficult to see a difference even when they were zooming in. Next up, let's talk about Flappy Bird, which just out of nowhere resurfaced, and it's from a certain company or corporation or basically entity that managed to get, I guess, the trademark for the game as it had expired or it was just available. And we know the original creator basically just discontinued Flappy Bird. They mentioned it had like ruined their life or is very addictive for a lot of people who are playing it. And I mean, I'm sure they made a ton of money from the game, but it didn't seem like it was worth it to them to keep the game up online, so they had basically pulled it down completely, and now we see at least someone showing up here to try to take advantage or resell the game in this case. Well, we have actually the original creator chiming in here. We can see this over on their account. This is from Don Wynn. Says, "No, I have no related with their game. I did not sell anything. I also don't support crypto." So the entity seemingly behind this revived Flappy Bird that looks weird in the first, like it doesn't have the same aesthetic. It has kind of a more retro look to it, but they've been tied to different crypto projects and stuff, and you kind of start putting two and two together here with it being like maybe a free-to-play game, microtransactions, cryptocurrency being brought in. You start to understand why Flappy Bird would be revived for this group, because they can use the name and the IP and stuff to then bring people in, and yes, probably make a bunch of money, and yes, probably in some way related to, we'll say some scam type thing. Again, it's hard to say what the plan is now, but it definitely looks very sketchy, right, from the outside looking in, but maybe it just comes back as a basic mobile game that's free to play, and it just has microtransactions, and that's it. But there are some concerns around the group right now behind it, so we'll see, I guess, as we get closer to its release. We're still waiting to see information around all of that. We have some screenshots and I guess some trailer footage and stuff. I was never really into Flappy Bird. It seems like a lot of people were. I completely missed out on that phenomenon. So I did put up a poll question about it to see how many people maybe had played it when it was available, and I guess we'll see what the audience says. Next up, let's talk about a particularly impressive port that is currently being worked on for the Sega Dreamcast. And this isn't technically new in the sense that the Sega Dreamcast is getting a new game or a new version of a game, because people do still like to develop and port things over to it just for fun, really. In this case, though, it does seem to be the situation of, we're gonna see if we can just do it, if it's even possible to bring Grand Theft Auto 3 to the Dreamcast without any serious modifications to the hardware, because originally we talked about them doubling up the RAM inside of the system. Not the case anymore, and in fact, some of the updates, this looks really good. It's definitely impressive. We can see this, though, which gets very interesting, posted. This is over on Time Extension, who noted this entire exchange here. And this is from Avi Vermey, who's a former technical director at Rockstar North. They worked on Grand Theft Auto 3 and a bunch of other GTA titles. And they actually quote tweeted Falco, who is currently working, along with just other people in the community, on this port. They say there is an impressive effort going on to make GTA 3 run on the Sega Dreamcast. The first months of development of GTA 3 back in 1999-2000 were done on the Dreamcast. For commercial reasons, we switched to the PS2. At the time, we did think it was technically possible to pull it all off on the Dreamcast, and these guys are actually doing it. Nice one. So first of all, I didn't know that they had originally been developing for the Dreamcast, although some people had mentioned that it was known, it was at least known before, but I thought that was a fun little cliff note there just to take away from this. But Falco did respond saying, "We're laying low for a while for fear of drawing too much attention. I just wanted to personally thank you from the bottom of my heart for your support." So yes, at this point, if you look at the footage, look, it's still early, obviously, and there's still some graphical issues. The fact that this is running as it is now on the Dreamcast from the GTA 3 version on the PS2 is it's noticeable, and that might also be a problem, because think about it now, you might start to, if you have Avi Vermey who's noticing this, yeah, you think people around them would also notice this in their social circles, and that also might lead to Rockstar and Take-Two noticing, and that's one of the reasons they're saying it here, and I'm gonna say it. You might want to lay low at least until the project is like 99% done and you're ready to release it, because Take-Two is swift with that DMCA. They don't mess around. And this is getting to a point of, oh, this is actually a thing. Like, this isn't, we might get it on the Dreamcast. We'll see if the thing doesn't explode. No, it's running on the Dreamcast right now. And it seems like every other week that I see this pop up, they're making more and more progress to where it's all coming together. So I would now just go very quiet and just work on this in the background in silence. And then when it is ready to go, you drop it before Take-Two can issue some sort of legal notice to stop you at like 0 hours. But hey, really impressive stuff. Now just go away for a while. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about the live service conundrum that I'm sure many of these big multiplayer games go through, typically in planning when they're creating the game. Is this going to be a title that we create as a free-to-play game, and then we go ahead and engineer everything around this in the game when it comes to rewards and progression? Well, in this case, Palworld, which did release in early access, of course, earlier this year, and it was a big hit on Xbox and on PC. We went through all the numbers. It was very impressive stuff to see that. Well, they were also kind of kicking around the idea of the future for Palworld, and it seems like the idea of it becoming a live service, even free-to-play game, did come up. Well, they did post this on their official account, where they say, at the time, this was of an interview where they're talking about the future of it, we are still considering the best way forward for Palworld to create a long-lasting game that continues to grow. We are still discussing this internally, as it is quite challenging to find the ideal path, but we have already decided that the free-to-play games-as-a-service approach is not suitable for us. Palworld was never designed with that model in mind, and it would require too much work to adapt the game at this point. Additionally, we are very aware that this just isn't what our players want, and we always put our players first. So they mentioned they're going to consider things like skins and DLC for Palworld going forward, most of the support development, because it still costs money. People, of course, there who are creating for the game have to get paid, and you can only sell the game so many times before you just run out of customers. So yes, they would have to figure out some other, let's say, just recurring revenue, as in like a subscription, not like that, but come up with ways for people, yeah, to technically pay them money for things like DLC and skins to continue supporting not only server costs, which, do you remember when they showed like a receipt of how much it was costing them when like millions of people were concurrently logged in, and it was tens of thousands of dollars like a month? It was wild stuff to see how much money it cost them. I think it peaked over $100,000 or something. So yeah, it costs a lot of money just to keep even the servers going at this point. So the idea, though, of them shifting everything to free-to-play, that would be like a Herculean task for them to just change the entire scope of the game, the way that your own character levels, the items you get, how much inventory space are you allowed as a free-to-play player versus a paid one. There's so many things that go into that. If you don't have that thought of in development, it's very difficult to move things over. So I do like the idea that they would keep it as a game that you give them money, you get the game, but they, of course, have to figure out ways to continue development and have people get paid. So we'll see what they come up with, but no, Palworld isn't going free to play. It's not becoming a games as a service title. They seem to have shot that down completely. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where they asked, did you play Flappy Bird when it was available? Well, 61% say yes, 39% say no. And I do remember the Flappy Bird craze. I just never really got into it. I've played the game before, and I mean, if you go into some arcades, it's like Dave & Buster's and stuff, they have like the arcade machine that's, I guess it's Flappy Bird. It's a version of Flappy Bird. I'm sure there's all kinds of clones and knockoffs of it at this point, but it was very simple. You press the screen and the bird will flap and go up and down, and you try to get past the different pipes. Again, I just missed it, but so many people commented on the potential revival of it that it was like millions and millions of impressions per tweet mentioning this thing. So yeah, a lot of people remember, and I'm sure a lot of people were hoping to eventually see it come back at some point, but maybe not like this. Again, we'll see when it does eventually release and what direction it goes. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Samuel. It says, hopefully the Spawncast covered this briefly, but the physical Switch version for MVC Collection is just a code in the box for Europe. Yeah, that was strange. I saw that pop up and I said, oh, you've got to be kidding me. That can't, really? You can't put a cartridge in there? But I believe the official physical release is not for another, what, 2 months? And that's where we should have everything on the cartridge. And if that's specific to certain regions, the good thing about the Switch clearly is it is region free. So you might have to import it depending on your region, but there will at least be a version of the game that will have a cartridge, just seemingly not yet, okay? So hold out for that physical copy if you really want to have it, at least on a cartridge or on a disc, technically, for PlayStation or wherever, because that is a game that we've seen disappear already Wouldn't shock me if it happened again, so you might as well grab it, at least for the collection, while you can. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed last week's Newswave, I'll leave that up in a card here next to me. Or maybe you wanted to hear about a certain PlayStation controller that most people forget even existed. I'll have that right below it. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.